Starting my video.
Let's pray together. Father, we love you and we thank you so much for your Son. We thank you for all that you do for us. Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have to come together to talk about some things that we believe matter to you very much, and we hope that they'll matter to those who are going to watch, those who are going to listen, those who are going to download this podcast. Father, we pray that your name will be glorified through it all and that we'll be able to edify others. Thank you for the family. Thank you for Jesus. Our prayer in his name. Amen.
Amen. We're good to go. Hey everybody, it's time once again. Welcome to episode what?
16.
Woo! 16 of the Edified podcast. We're really thankful that you have taken time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We appreciate all of those who have supported us from the very beginning, and those that are watching us now on Facebook Live. We want to thank you for tuning in. I want to say hello to you. We're very excited about today's topic. It's something that means a lot to us.
Right.
It's something that's important to us, and we certainly know it'll be important to you. It's for sure important to God, and we're going to be talking about the family. The family was something that it's important to all of us. It's a part of our everyday lives. It's what drives us in many ways. What gets our life going. You know, it directs our paths, our spiritual family, our physical family. We're going to talk about all of that. Justin and I, happen to be bookends to an author. Thank you very much. An author of a book that I happen to be holding right here, and you can see that if you're on Facebook. It's entitled 21 Habits of Highly Functioning Families. And I'm sure Justin will back me up to say, if you don't have a copy, shame on you. You need to get one, because this is a fantastic book by a fantastic guy. So today we're going to focus a lot about the principles that Terry talked about in his book. And so, Terry, I think we need to turn it over to you.
Thanks, G. I appreciate that. I wrote that book not to make money by any stretch of the imagination. So we're not here to try to sell books or anything. But I wrote the book because I believe the family is under attack. When I talk with people, most of the times it revolves around their family. When I have to counsel with people, it revolves around what they're struggling with as a family or what they may be struggling with inside their family. You know, God's design of the family is perfect. He designed the family, of course, in the beginning. Adam had a job. His responsibility, of course, there in the garden was to tend it, of course, but also to try to find a helper amongst all those animals. And thanks be to God, he didn't find a helper among the animals. So God put him in a sleep, of course, and you know how the story goes. He took a rib from his side and he formed Eve. And remember now, Adam's been with all those animals. He's been with all those just creatures and trying to find that helper. And you can imagine as the anesthesia from God, if you will, is wearing off. And he looks up and he sees this beautiful woman, Eve. His response is poetic, and we put it in sermons all the time for weddings. And he says there, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. And of course the Bible tells us they were naked and not ashamed. They didn't know sin. They didn't know the dangers of it. But the devil was slithering his way the whole time. And of course, there's the concept of them falling from God's good grace there when they sin, eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But when Satan slithered his way into Eve's life and ultimately Adam's life, what he did was slither his way into the family's life. And ever since then, I believe he's had a foot inside the door to the family. Our church family here at Azalea City is growing because of our families.
Right.
We have such a family atmosphere here. Justin is very much a critical part of that. George, our elders, are critical parts of it because they've put an emphasis on that. And so we have Justin. Justin come to us. You've heard us say this before. He's come to us from a different field entirely. He was somebody that was working in forestry and growing plants and trees and families in that realm. And so God allowed him to come to us, and he's been working with our youth and our families. and he does a great job, and I want to tag him in. Yeah, we'll talk about the book, we'll talk about life experience, but what we want you all to know, whoever's listening, whoever's watching, is that the family matters to God. He designed it. He created it. And remember what James said, all good and all perfect gifts come from above, come from God. So the family's good, the family's perfect. We've just got to get the devil out. We got to slither him out. And so that today we want to use this podcast to talk about some of those things. But Justin, go ahead and chime in from your perspective on this type of subject matter.
You mentioned already that in first part of Genesis there, chapter 1, where he creates man and woman's created for man, and God formed really the first marriage ceremony, as I've heard you preach in many marriage ceremonies before.
In yours even, too.
Yeah, that's right. Mine too. I remember, I heard that. Genesis 1:28 says that God tells them to be fruitful and increase in number. And in chapter 2 and verse 24, I believe it is, 28, chapter 1 verse 28 tells that, chapter 2 verse 24 says that those two are supposed to become one flesh. Right? Those two are to become one. He doesn't say, Adam, you go off, Eve, you go off, do your own thing. No, he says, you two join together, have children. You're going to rule over everything. You're going to be, you're going to have dominion over every creature, every animal on earth. He tells them to be united, and I think it's really cool. When God establishes families, they're supposed to be united. We're not supposed to be at odds with each other. We're supposed to build each other up. You know, we titled this podcast "Family Matters." We know the TV show I grew up watching. I don't remember the entire plot behind it, but I know Carl Winslow, I believe, comes home. I know he had a tough day being a policeman or security guard or whatever he was. Well, he came home to a bunch of crazy kids and everything going on, but the whole idea behind the show was family mattered. And there's a lot of things at home that sometimes can drive us crazy, but we need to always refer back to what God tells us, to become one flesh. Husband and wife, they leave their father, they leave their mother, they unite, become one, they raise kids, they're fruitful, and then they grow. And we hopefully will, as families, help to grow our children up to be faithful spouses as well one day.
That's exactly right. And what you said right there, the two become one flesh, is so critical, and that's the way God designed it. But then later on we see that it says whatever man God has joined together, let not man separate. But yet the divorce rate is what it is. Yeah. The divorce rate is high. People living together is high as has ever been without being married. There are all kinds of things out there that people have done to diminish what God created. So what can we do to get back to the book, to get back to the basis? Why did I write this book? And I base it on the Bible because God wants us to have families that do matter. He wants us to have magnificent marriages. He wants us to have wonderful families. And I believe that's something that's so critical in today's day and time.
Yeah, and you know, again, as we attribute the things of the world to things of a spiritual nature, you know, we can have a great family unit at home. Even by the world standards, we could have a successful family, kind of that picket fence kind of family, and we can have success by worldly standards. But as we have documented and we stand firm on, if we're not spiritually successful, then we're really failures, right? And so when we think about the core family, what is it about this family that needs to exist? What needs to happen? Well, just like in the parallel to the Lord's church is phenomenal. Only God could create something so perfect, right? Between having a spiritual family and then our physical family. And we're talking about our physical family. What does that need to look like? Well, you're going to talk to them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You'll bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be on frontlets between your eyes. You'll write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So a successful spiritual family is one who keeps God in the forefront. I mean, and that's got to be the foundation that we begin with.
That's right. From Deuteronomy chapter 6, that mentality of make sure it's written, let it be frontless before your eyes, put it on the doorpost. You know, it's kind of like we put it on the refrigerator or, you know, make sure we'd have it in front of our sight every day, a sticky note on our desk, a reminder in our phone, whatever it may be. That mentality is exactly the basis of why I come up with this book. 21, and I chose 21 because experts, not me, show that if you do something 21 times, it becomes a habit. Mm-hmm. So I come up with 21 habits playing off of that we can practice to help us remember Deuteronomy 6, so that it will be forefronts between our eyes. And with that, they're just simple things that I believe God wants us to understand and wants us to practice so that we can be the best we can possibly be. And so that's what today, that's what we want to give you. Just some practical things that I believe we all try to do in our families, things that I try to practice in this book myself, that we can be better husbands. I mean, you know, I feel like I try to be a good husband, but I can always be better. My wife, be a better wife, be a better father. Man, I feel like I fail so many times as a father. You know, so many times I get frustrated with myself. It's a constant thing that we have to do, or better grandfather, or you know, whatever we need to be it.
Mm-hmm. When we see people post on Facebook, they're about to have a child, right? Because that's where when it's official, it goes on Facebook, right? Or some social media site. They announce, hey, we're going to start a family, or we're trying to start a family. It's interesting that we never really see a husband and wife as a family. So when you start having kids, that the family term kind of gets tagged to you. I find that interesting. You think back when Cain had killed his brother Abel, and God comes to him and says,
the old family of four.
Exactly. Cain, where is your brother Abel? And he says, am I my brother's keeper? Well, isn't the answer absolutely yes? Sure. We are to look out for each other. I think that's really cool. That I was a terrible big brother for a lot of time growing up, because I didn't really look out for my sisters. I was, you know, I guess just as younger, we were selfish, more selfishly minded. That we've got to look out for our siblings. We look out for our parents. Our parents are looking out for us. That family really does matter to God, right? And if we can be a close-knit family, I like the part where it says, where you just read from Deuteronomy, it talks about being on our doorpost, outside of our houses. I know we don't go put scripture on the outside of our houses, but what it means to me in our culture today, that when somebody drives by my house, they look at that house and say, I know a Christian family lives there. Yeah. I hope that's what is portrayed. Sure. It may not be all the time, but I hope when people pass my house or they see our family, I know that's a Christian family because of the way they act and the way they live, the way they look out for each other. They're Riley and Grayson love each other. Hopefully Ashley and myself portray that we love each other and that we're a close-knit family, because, again, until you have kids, I don't know that we're really tagged as a family so much. But I think if we can be close-knit, if we can be together, if we can look out for our brothers and sisters, look out for our spouses, then we can start to dwindle that percentage of divorce down just by being a good example to people.
Yeah, and you know, I think we've all used this phrase in lessons and sermons for many years, and as it pertains to our children, is that God gave them to us as a gift, as a blessing. Huge blessing. But what's the other side of that? It's not like that's a one-sided gift, it's done, here's your child. He wants them back.
Sure.
Right? And so when we think of it from that perspective, that means he wants them back for all of eternity. That responsibility is on us as parents, as grandparents, as aunts and uncles, you know, those that have influence over those in our family. And I think too often what happens is selfishness can still exist in our adult lives, right? Mm-hmm. And we get so busy in what we're doing that we don't take the time to consider the spiritual state of every member of my family. And that's dangerous. Mm-hmm. I have a responsibility for the spiritual welfare of Samantha, for Alex, Amanda, Aaron, and for Charlie, and for Owen, right? And that has to be, you know, really in the forefront of my mind. And that should direct my steps. If things aren't how they need to be, and I know it, I have that responsibility to not only pray for them, but to reach out and to, as you say, love them enough to tell them the truth. Because, again, some of these things we say are so obvious, and we say them over and over again, but the only thing that really matters is our relationship with God.
Right.
And so we've got to keep that kind of mentality that ultimately everything we do and say has to be pointed towards doing it right and doing it God's way.
Yeah, and you guys know this, and George, you walked step for step with me through it, but it took Michelle and I quite a number of years to be able to have a child, and that's probably why in my daughter's class, she's in first grade, I have former students who have children in her class, former students I taught. So, I'm an older dad, if you will, but it took us 7 years to be able, from the time we started trying to have children to the time Bo was born. And I'm not saying I love my children any more than anyone else, but I think what those 7 years did, and I write about that in the book too, about the struggles with all of that and the prayers and everything, but what that did for me is when I held Bo for the first time, from looking at how God had taken us through this journey, it was the greatest just reaffirmation of my faith I've ever had. And I looked at him and I knew, there is no way this is by happen chance. This is, Bo is from God, like you said. But God, I'm going to do everything I can. You bless me with him. I'm going to do everything in my power to get him back to you. And listen, I fell plenty at that. But one thing I set out, and Justin and I've got an elder here, and I want to say this to any ministers out there, what have you, is we can't get so concerned about saving others that we miss helping save our family.
No doubt.
That is so critical. Noah, and I've said this on the podcast before, but Noah by today's standards would have been fired a long time ago by the local church. I mean, you think about it. He preached 100 and some years and never got anybody to obey. Never got anybody to come as far as outside his family. But at the end of the day, and don't even think about his sons. I think that's very important, and I think there's a lot of lessons to learn of Noah involving his children in the work. But he got those daughter-in-laws to leave their families who drowned in the flood. He got them on the ark too. Right. And I think it's so important. And you talked about how far our love will stretch out to your grandchildren, to one day their children, if God blesses us long enough to see that. It's so important. And Justin, you deal with this all the time as part of your responsibilities here to the church and to God. Maybe now walk us through, and Justin has two beautiful children who are growing and learning every day and all, but aside from your own children, maybe reaching the audience out there that what some advice we can give them from a church standpoint to help keep our children involved in the work of the Lord.
Well, I think some of our most committed kids are the ones that have the strongest knit families, and that's one thing I really liked about Isaiah City coming here, is there's a lot of family ties, and it makes coming to worship really, really, I guess, extra special. I mean, it's special to begin with, but when we moved down here, I have a grandfather down here now. I've got aunts and uncles down here, and my parents down here, and we all decided that since I was, blessed enough to work here, they're like, hey, let's worship together. And that's really cool because it was all scattered out. We've always been scattered out.
Yeah, but your dad did tell me last night as we were leaving, he's here because of me, not you.
Preacher follower, huh?
Right.
But it was really cool because my Uncle Jimmy, who's very involved here as well, told me one time when I first started, it's really cool that most of our family is down here and we get to worship together. Especially on mom's side of the family, and both sides are, but we're really close knit, and when we get together, it's never any arguing. It's always a lot of fun. It's a lot of picking, but it's a lot of fun. And you can see that the families that are the closest together generally are the strongest in their faith. The kids that are the most committed. I know in a portion of your book you talk about turning the devices off and giving, putting them away when you're at the dinner table, when you're at in the home. Because, and you've made this point before, and I'll let you touch on how we we worry about alcohol, we worry about drugs, we worry about all these things outside the home, but a lot of times we forget about in the home. We forget about protecting our kids and our families in the home. Well, I've been to local restaurants and seen a newly married couple, which seemingly newly married couple, is a younger couple than myself and Ashley, and they sat down and never looked at each other before their food came. And they were on their devices, both on Facebook or whatever, texting. And then food came and they ate. So they went through the entire dinner, and I don't know, they had a real conversation. Right. So again, it just goes back to the strength. I know it starts with the mom and the dad. A lot of times today, parents really let their kids make too many decisions. And
amen that.
Yeah. You can see it, right?
Yeah.
And their priorities. And, oh, well, we can't come to church because so-and-so's got a project, but they didn't work on it Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night. They're going to use it Saturday or Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. We can't come to this teen event. I really think it goes back to mom and dad. A lot of the way kids are turning out now is a reflection of their parents.
You know, and man, I don't know. I think we could probably talk weeks on this. Mm-hmm. And maybe it needs to be a part 1, part 2, whatever. But there's so many things that are just flooding my mind. But to talk about what you're talking about, you referred to me, this is something I said. You know, I talked about in the old days, if you will, nobody even locked their doors because everybody knew everybody and this and that. Now we lock our doors. Well, that wasn't enough, so we got deadbolts. Some people said that's not enough, so we get a chain at the top. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not enough, so we got to go get a burglar alarm. Well, that's not enough, so I got to go get a shotgun, a rifle, and whatever else, you know. And you know, we're prepared. We're going to protect our families. I've got my doors locked. I've got my deadbolt on. I've got my chain on. I set the alarm before I go to bed. I got my gun loaded in the safe. But you know, some of the most times that are dangerous are already locked inside of the home. Yeah. And listen, we have devices. Our kids go to a device school, so they have to have a device. I've got computers. I've got cell phones. We've got Apple Watches. We've got the whole 9 yards. But there comes a time when enough is enough. Some of the most dangerous things in the world is drowning yourself in this. And I've literally counseled families who are falling apart because of too much time on devices. I've seen people have affairs that started on Facebook. Once again, all that stuff can be used for good, but there's so many dangerous things it can be used for. And this is just one of many things that we have to... Is it popular to look at my children and say, you got 30 minutes today and that's it, and we set a timer on it? Is that popular? No. Mm-hmm. You know, why not? Why not more? Well, there have to be some times that we've got to take I'm going to be my kid's best buddy off. Here's what my dad said. Again, I told you on the podcast before, I was raised in a school of hard knocks. I love my dad for it, though. I love my mom, the way they did it. They did the best they could to raise 3 knuckle-headed boys. Now, all 3 are Christians today, so they did something right.
That's right.
Okay? But here's what my daddy would tell us. Now, I'm not suggesting Facebook Live, podcast listeners, this is maybe the best advice, but he would say, there are going to be days I don't like you. And there are going to be days you don't like me. He said, but I'm always going to love you. Now, listen, that may be a little harsh to some, but I understand exactly what he means. There are days my kids don't like me. There are moments that I don't like what they're doing. But that love, you see, God didn't say, Terry, I want you to have Bo and just be his BFF.
Yep.
No, I want you to be his father. And then he said, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord.
Yeah, my dad used to say, I may not always be right, but I'll always be father. I'll always be dad.
That's exactly
right? And that, trust me, in my house, that was enough.
Yeah.
That settled it. And you know, this device conversation may need to be a whole topic one day. I think it's probably a prudent conversation we have to have. But I'll say, aside from devices, there could be 1,000 reasons why inside our homes right now that things aren't as they should be. Mm-hmm. Conflicts unresolved, bitterness that exists between people, misunderstandings. I know a lot, we've talked recently in my Bible class about following Matthew 18 resolves, long-term bitterness by a short-term resolution, Mm-hmm. But whatever it is, I'm going to make a suggestion to you. if you got something going on in your family and it's just keeping you apart, it's keeping your family unit from being what it needs to be, I'm going to ask you to look backwards a little bit. Look back to a time when there was great peace in your family. Maybe you have to go back to the beginning. Maybe you have to go back to that nursery when you held your child for the first time. Maybe it needs to go back to a holiday or a family gathering that you always talk about and everybody laughs about because it was a great time, a great memory. Our love for each other needs to be a great motivator for us to do whatever's possible to be a united family. And you got to do it God's way. There's no question. And I'm not skirting around that or going in a different direction. But my point is, there is literally practically no reason for our families not to exist in harmony and love for one another. God requires it of us, ultimately. But might I suggest that you look to go back to the good old days in your family when it existed in harmony and peace, in laughter, in joy, in fun. I have the best friends in the whole world. But what I enjoy most in this life right now is spending time with my family.
Absolutely.
Football season's here. A couple days, it officially starts tonight or maybe even started last week, but Saturday's really the day, right? I'll be missing my dad on Saturday because that's something that we did for many years together, spend Saturdays together watching football. But to keep that going, my youngest brother Andrew and I, that's what we do. And we have been looking forward to this all summer long. It's meant something to us. The games are fun and that's all, great. But we enjoy the time that we spend together. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. I wouldn't trade the time. I was almost late to work the other day because I hadn't seen my grandson Owen in about a week. And Samantha was coming back from Milton with him. And so I waited so I could spend 5 minutes with him. Because family matters.
Absolutely.
If I don't have the right relationship with my family, my life is not as complete as it should be. And I think before we wrap up today, and I don't know how soon that'll be, but I think we need to touch on a moment about people that deal with being maybe the only believer in their family, because there's an alternative. there's an even greater family that we can be a part of.
Yeah, that's really hard. If somebody is out there listening or watching and you are the only one who does believe, you are the only one who is faithful, how do you respond to that? Well, the first thing is we have a responsibility to the greatest Father, and that is God. If we have people that discourage us along the way, and sometimes family does do that, again, the devil's going to do anything he can to try to keep God's children from having a relationship with him. So he may decide, I'm going to turn family against family. Well, what do you do then? Well, the best thing you do then is I think we let our light shine. We produce the fruit, we love, and we take advantage of the opportunities. We spend a lot of time in prayer when we do that.
Yeah.
But certainly it can definitely be a delicate situation. But we got to know that we have a responsibility no matter what. Jesus said if we're going to be his disciples, the word translate hate, unless I hate mama and daddy. But that's not what he means. Jesus doesn't want us to hate anybody. But love less. Our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, and our own self. We can't be his disciples. And so it is a challenge.
We're all born into a physical family. And then, as Paul tells us in Romans 8:15, once we're born again, we're born into a spiritual family.
Yeah.
Which, at that point, God becomes our Father. Jesus Christ really becomes our advocate, our only way back to God. And then we become brothers and sisters of such a greater family, a greater size family, a stronger family. So it is important to know that we have family on earth, but sometimes family fails us. Sometimes family doesn't believe like we do. We always have the spiritual family, and that's really important to know, that God, once we're adopted as sons by him and through the waters of baptism, thank goodness for Jesus Christ, then we belong to such a greater family. And family matters to God. Physical families matter to God. Well, spiritual family matters to God. And since he sent Jesus to die for us, and since Jesus went through all that for us,
yes,
we have a promise of heaven. And if family matters to God, He's going to save us in the end.
That parallel is perfect, right? We mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast. The parallel between our physical and our spiritual families is literally perfect, right? We have and are supposed to have leadership in the home. Mm-hmm. We have leadership in God's family, right? Christ is the head. There is also a structure within the Lord's church, just like there is in the family. You know, the family, my physical family works best when there's harmony and peace. The same can be said of our spiritual families. When there's something that divides us, we need to look to a better time in our relationship with our spiritual family and make it right. Matthew 18 says, go and fix that. The result of a harmonious physical home is growing in the Lord as a unit. The result of a harmonious church congregation is growing in the Lord. And you in this life, you cannot ask for a better thing than that. And so, for my part, I'll wrap up my part of it, I guess, and just to say, you know, as Terry said, if you are the only believer in your home, or you have a struggling family, and you feel like you have nowhere to turn with your physical family, continue to try, continue to pray, continue to work hard. It is hard work. Family matters are tough matters sometimes, but you always have a spiritual family that is here to hold your hands, to hold them high, to carry you on our back if necessary. And that's one of the things that we certainly offer is spiritual encouragement and support. If you're in that situation and you need us, we're here for you to pray with you, to pray for you, to do everything that we can. But I'm going to tell you something. I've tried it both ways, fellas, to be honest with you. I wish I could say I didn't. But in my life, I've tried it both ways. I've tried to do it on my own, tried to do it without God, tried to not care at some point in my life the struggles that were going on in my own families. But doing it with God is a much better way. Yeah. And there is just no comparison. And I wouldn't go back. Obviously, I can't predict the future, but if it's possible, and if it's up to me, I'm not going back.
If it's up to me, you're not going back either. When it comes down to it, I want to be married to my wife from here to eternity.
Yep.
I know that's not as popular today. People being married 50 years is not as popular as it used to be. It's just the bottom line. But I don't want to be married to my wife, and at our 50-year wedding anniversary, people's throwing a nice thing or whatever for us, and we're celebrating, and people come up, 50 years, congratulations. I don't want to be that guy, that grumpy old husband that says, yeah, it's been the 50 worst years of my life being married to that old battle axe or whatever.
Man.
But folks, there are people like that today.
Yeah.
They just stayed married and there was misery in it.
Yeah.
When I decided I was going to write a book, a lot of prayer went into it. I knew I was going to write a book on family. I wanted to include my own family, my own children. There are a lot of personal things in the book. But when it come to designing the cover, I wanted my children to be involved. And so if you see the cover, you'll see a picture. And my son, Bo, drew it, and Madeline did the coloring. And so they were a team in it. And I sat down, and I gave them a piece of paper and some colored pencils, and I said, I want you to draw a picture of a family.
That's it?
That's it. I want you to draw what you picture a family to be. Well, on the cover, they drew our family. There's me, there's Michelle, Bo and Madeline, and even Harley, which Madeline colored with a pink little hair bow. She's a girl dog. Yeah. She's a pink dog, but in real life she's brown. But anyhow, the point of it is that you're a son. Well, that's not my house, though, and that's where I want to get to.
Cool.
Okay? They drew a church building because they associated our family being a happy family, making sure that God was involved.
Yep.
And to me, it summed it all up. And folks, at the end of the day, I don't care. I've been able to accomplish some pretty cool things in life, but the greatest accomplishment I can have is to know that I raised faithful children.
100%.
And that's the legacy I want to leave. And I hope and pray that I'll be afforded that opportunity.
You know, my dad, when we were kids, always played a song for us, and I could tell you every word in the song, but if I did, I'd probably end up crying or something eventually, because it meant a lot to me. Harry Chapin sings the song "The Cat's in the Cradle," right? And throughout that song, the father has a son. He's excited about it, but he says there's planes to catch and there's bills to pay. My son learned to walk while I was away. The son turns 10. The dad gives him a ball and a glove. He's like, "Thanks, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw?" He says, "Son, not today. Yeah. And I've got things to do. We'll do this another time." Well, eventually, the son wants to be just like his dad. What son doesn't want to be just like his dad growing up? He always says, "One day I'm going to be just like you," and he becomes that. Right? He graduates high school. The dad's like, "Yes, son, I'm so proud of you. I'm excited. Let's sit in. Let's talk for a while." He says, "Dad, really what I want's the car keys, please. Can you give them to me? I'll see you later." And then later in life, the dad at this point calls the son and says, "Hey, y'all should come visit." "Well, Dad, we'd love to, but the kids are sick. We got all this stuff going on. Life's happening. So it was good talking to you." And he says, "As I hung up the phone, it occurred to me that my son had grown up just like me, and missed out on his entire family." And look, I know there's even Christian songs out there about men and families trying to achieve the American dream. And a lot of that time, we do that as parents to provide for our kids. Let's let them have the biggest house to grow up in, nice cars, nice everything growing up. Well, if we spend so much time in achieving that, but we miss our family and we miss impacting our family, or we send them in the wrong direction, then what was it worth in the end?
Right? It'll haunt me.
Exactly. And I can imagine, I know it's just a song, but I can imagine as that father hung up the phone, he's like, "Oh, wow.
What did I do?
It's too late now." Right? And my dad used to play that song for us, and he'd tell us that I'll never let any of that get in the way. And he showed that. It was really cool. Now, my parents aren't perfect. My parents are really awesome at running ragged, trying to make sure that they were at all of our athletic events, all of our field trips, involved in our lives. My dad took a pay cut. He worked shift work, and when I was younger, he was gone a lot at night. I was growing up maybe 2-3 years old. I didn't really remember much of that. And he would always come in before I went to bed, and I remember him kind of tucking me in or singing a song or whatever. Well, he quit that job, making pretty good money, selling Shackley products full-time at home, just so he could make sure he made all of our field trips, just so he could make sure he coached all of our teams, or at least was involved in taking us. And that always meant a lot to me, and that impacted me. It's impacted my sisters, I know, and we're going to do the same, hopefully Ashley and I, for our 2 kids and my sisters when they have kids later down in life. 2 weeks ago, my dad took my sister Katie to Montana, drove, 2,000 miles, whatever it is, 33 to 36 hours, drove her up there just so she didn't have to go alone. Catches a plane back to Mobile, gets back at midnight, works that week, then goes with my mom to Georgia to watch my sister who's playing college volleyball now, to make sure he spent some time with her. And then it's just incredible. It's really cool stories of how, again, my parents aren't perfect.
But then he was at worship with you.
Yeah,
and
true.
Your family last
yeah,
night.
And he does so much for us as well. And our lives are busier now with kids, but it's always meant something to me. And I'll never forget that song. And I always remember that because I know the impact that it had on our relationship when I was younger, that he would tell us, me and my middle sister at the time, that I'll never let anything get in the way of family. Family matters to my parents, and that was really cool. Family matters to God. He says that he's going to adopt us. Jesus tells us in John 13:34 and 35, "As I have loved you, so you have love for one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples." If we can show people that we love our families, we will prove to people we are disciples of Christ.
Yep.
Family matters to us. We will prove that family matters to God.
That's right.
Today, thank you so much for listening. What's really cool about this is our Facebook Live audience, our podcast listeners outside of that, through YouTube or through the Edified site or on iTunes. We want you to know that we consider you family, and you matter to us. So if there's ever a time that you can send a topic, or you have some kind of concern or want to know more about something, please send that to us. We can be found, you can email us at edifiedpodcast@gmail.com. We are edified_, our Edified_podcast on Instagram. You can search us through the Edified site on Facebook. Again, YouTube channel, we're Edified. And then also through iTunes, you can search us, again, Edified.
And we're trying to get on Spotify as well.
And working to get other places. We are pasted all over social media.
That's right.
You probably by now know all of our own personal Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts. So if you ever have a need, please reach out to us. We appreciate you tuning in every week. We want you to know that you do matter to us. And we will always be satisfied if God is glorified and you are edified. Thank you for tuning in this week.